She kept screaming for help even as he lunged at me again. His palm slammed into my shoulder, and I staggered back into the kitchen counter. I caught myself on the edge of the sink, heart hammering as I tried to regain balance. Patrick's eyes were wild, his cheeks flushed red with rage under the harsh ceiling light. He took another step toward me, teeth clenched, while behind him Taylor's shrill voice filled the house. "She's attacking us. Somebody, please help." Taylor screamed at the top of her lungs. Her words rebounded off the living room walls, a distortion of reality. I stood with my empty hands open in front of me, fingers spread to show I held nothing. The only thing in my grip was restraint, and it took everything I had not to retaliate. Patrick lunged at me again, arms swinging in a clumsy arc. I sidestepped into the dining area, my back bumping the table and rattling the chair legs. He nearly stumbled past me with the momentum, catching himself on the doorway. I could see Mike standing behind him near the hall, phone raised and recording silently. Patrick didn't notice, he was fixed on me. "Iona, stop fighting," Taylor shouted, voice cracking with feigned fear. I tasted copper, blood from where I'd bitten the inside of my cheek. My lungs burned as I sucked in air, preparing for the next shove or swing. Patrick's stance widened, blocking my path to the front door. My mind raced, instincts clashing with the careful plan that had brought me here. One swing from me could have ended this. I was strong from years of hauling lumber and swinging hammers, but that single violent act was exactly what they wanted. They wanted a show. They wanted me to lose control. Patrick's nostrils flared as he threw a punch toward my face. I ducked. His fist whooshed past my ear, and his own momentum sent him off balance. He slammed into the wall with a dull thud, knocking a framed photograph to the floor. The glass shattered at his feet. He whirled back, chest heaving. I could see Taylor out of the corner of my eye, one hand pressed dramatically to her mouth, the other clutching her phone. "I'm calling the police," she yelled. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. For a fraction of a second, Patrick hesitated, glancing toward the window at the red-blue flicker approaching. That pause was enough. I stepped away from the table, breathing hard, and wiped a thin line of blood from my lip with the back of my hand. He looked back at me, eyes widening now not with anger but with the first hints of panic. Taylor's fake sobs intensified as she sank to the floor, still on the phone with emergency dispatch. In the strobing lights through the window, Patrick's face flickered between hues of red and blue. This is how it ends, I thought. With a whimper and a crash in my own home. The front door burst open, and 2 officers rushed in with hands hovering over their holsters. Patrick immediately threw his hands up in surrender, chest still rising and falling rapidly. Taylor pointed at me with shaking fingers, tears streaming down her cheeks on cue. She attacked him," Taylor managed to sob. "My fiancé was just defending himself." One officer gently guided Taylor up and out of the way, while the other approached me, eyes narrowed. My mouth opened to speak, but I forced myself to stay calm. Mike stepped forward from the hallway, lowering his phone. "You might want to see this first," Mike said, his voice steady. He held up the phone with the screen facing the officers. The room fell eerily quiet except for Taylor's exaggerated sniffles. I watched in silence as the officers leaned in to view the video that Mike had been recording, the video I'd asked him to capture, just in case. It showed everything. Patrick shoving me holding my hands up and not fighting back, Taylor screaming lies. Patrick's shoulders slumped as he realized what was playing on that tiny screen. Taylor's sobs died in her throat. The officer nearest me exhaled slowly, then turned to look at Patrick and Taylor with a hard glare. I closed my eyes for a second. The sirens had stopped. My heart, however, was still pounding. As the officers began to speak, words about false reports, rights and cuffs, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I hadn't said a single word since it started. There was nothing left to say. 6 weeks earlier, I came home hours before I normally would on a weekday. The January sun was just sinking behind the Rockies, casting long blue shadows across our quiet street. A light snow had started to fall, speckling my windshield as I pulled into the driveway. I noticed Taylor's silver pickup truck parked next to Patrick's car in front of the house. Seeing her truck there wasn't unusual. Taylor often stopped by to go over business proposals or join us for dinner since she became my business partner 2 years ago. I was glad to have an early end to the day, thinking maybe I'd surprise them with takeout from the Thai place Patrick loved. I stepped through the front door expecting the usual warmth of our home. The smell of Patrick's cologne in the foyer, maybe a football game murmuring from the living room TV, the clatter of Taylor and Patrick chatting in the kitchen. Instead, I walked into an oppressive silence. The house was dim. Only a single lamp in the living room was on, casting a golden pool of light over the sofa. Patrick and Taylor were sitting apart on the couch, Patrick at one end, elbows on his knees and face in his hands, and Taylor at the far arm, eyes red and fixed on the carpet. They both looked up when I closed the front door behind me, and I knew immediately something was wrong. My stomach pinched with sudden nerves. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked softly, slipping off my snow-dusted boots. My voice sounded too loud for the hush in the room. Neither of them answered right away. Patrick rubbed a hand over his face, and Taylor blinked rapidly, as if fighting fresh tears. "Iona, we need to talk," Patrick said at last, standing up. His movements were slow and stiff, like he was bracing for impact. A spike of fear hit my chest. I glanced between them. Taylor wouldn't meet my eyes. Her cheeks were blotchy, and she kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. My mind instantly conjured a dozen awful scenarios. An accident, a death, someone was sick. Something terrible had clearly happened. What is it? Did something happen? I took a step forward, shrugging off my coat but not moving to hang it up. I clutched it in my arms like a shield instead. Taylor inhaled shakily and stood as well. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were brimming with tears. "I'm pregnant," she said softly. For a second, I just stared, uncomprehending. "Pregnant?" I echoed. My gaze darted to Patrick, who was now pacing a short line behind the coffee table. Taylor was unmarried and not dating anyone that I knew of. Realization crept in like an icy draft. My mouth went dry. "Wait," I started, the word barely more than a whisper. Patrick stopped pacing and turned to face me. His eyes were shining with tears now too. "Iona, he swallowed hard. "The baby, it's mine," he said in a strangled voice. "I'm so sorry." It felt as if the floor tilted beneath me. I gripped the back of the armchair beside me to steady myself. The room had fallen deathly silent again, except for the rushing of blood in my ears. Taylor looked down, a tear rolling down her cheek and dripping onto the hardwood floor. Patrick took a hesitant step toward me, hand half raised as if he wanted to touch me or catch me in case I fell. I couldn't breathe. My chest seized with a pain I'd never felt before. Each heartbeat thudded painfully, echoing the single thought that pounded through my skull. He got Taylor pregnant. My fiancé slept with my business partner and got her pregnant. "I know this is a shock," Patrick stammered, words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "We never meant for this to happen. We didn't want to hurt you." I held up my hand without thinking, palm out, as if warding off a blow. He stopped in his tracks a few feet from me. "When?" My voice cracked, and I swallowed, trying again. "When did this start?" I asked. Taylor choked on a sob. She pressed her hands to her face. Patrick winced, glancing at her and then back at me. "A few months ago," he admitted quietly. "Just after Christmas." A bitter taste filled my mouth. Just after Christmas. 4 months. My mind flashed back to that time, late nights at the office, early mornings on job sites. I had been putting in 12-hour days right after the holidays, working overtime to land a massive $1.2 million renovation contract and to save up for our wedding in the spring. I'd come home every night exhausted, collapsing into bed with barely enough energy to ask Patrick about his day. And apparently, while I was breaking my back for our future, my fiancé was spending his nights with Taylor. I realized I hadn't spoken in what felt like minutes. The silence drew out, heavy and suffocating. Patrick ran a hand through his brown hair I used to play with absent-mindedly in bed on Sunday mornings, and looked genuinely pained. Taylor was openly crying now, shoulders shaking. "It just happened," Taylor whispered between sobs. "We never planned any of this, I swear. We tried to stop, but..." She looked at Patrick, and a flash of something passed between them. Guilt, fear, maybe something else. It made my stomach churn. "But you didn't stop," I said. My voice sounded hollow in my own ears. I let my coat drop from my arms to the floor, no longer feeling the chill of melted snow seeping through it. "And now you're having a baby." Neither of them replied. Patrick's eyes pleaded with me, as if there were any answer that could undo this. I remembered the night he proposed to me 8 months ago, how he slipped that diamond ring onto my finger under a summer sky, how he promised me forever. I had spent $22,000 on that ring myself because Patrick insisted he deserved the best, and I wanted to make him happy. That ring still glittered on my left hand, a cruel reminder of promises now shattered. I realized I was absently twisting it on my finger. With a shaky breath, I forced my hand to be still. "So, what now?" I asked quietly, looking at the two of them huddled together in misery on our sofa. Patrick stepped closer, desperation written in the tight lines of his face. "We can figure this out," he said. Maybe we postpone the wedding. Just for a while," he added quickly. "Take some time to, think things through. But we can still make it work, Iona. We can still be together, eventually." I stared at him, barely believing what I was hearing. My eyes darted to Taylor, who had stood up as well. She wiped her face and nodded. "And the business," she cut in, her voice trembling but earnest. "We've built an amazing company together, Iona. This doesn't have to ruin that. I still want to be partners. I need us to stay partners." I let out a soft, incredulous laugh. They weren't talking about fixing what they'd broken. They were talking about preserving their own comforts, our engagement, my business, all while they had an affair behind my back and created a life in the process. My hand was throbbing, I realized, from clenching the armchair. I released it and flexed my fingers slowly. "You want me to just pause my engagement to the man I love while he has a child with someone else?" I asked, hearing the dangerous calm in my own voice. "And all of us keep working together like nothing happened?" "You're right, it sounds insane," Patrick said quickly, stepping closer. He reached out as if to touch my arm, but I flinched away and he stopped. I don't want to lose you. I love you. This baby, it complicates things, I know. But maybe we can find a way." "No," the word came out sharp and final. I finally lifted my eyes to fully meet his. For the first time since I walked in, he looked away. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Taylor took a tentative step forward. "Iona, please, we can't undo what happened. But maybe all of us together can figure out a way to get through this?" I don't want you to lose everything. I don't want to lose you either. I turned my gaze on her, and she actually shrank back a little. I was distantly aware that my whole body was trembling. From anger, from shock, I wasn't sure. You already lost me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper but as cold as I'd ever heard it. Both of you. You lost me the second you decided to do this. A sob caught in Patrick's throat. Don't say that, please, he begged. I messed up. We messed up. But don't throw away what we have, what we all have, because of one mistake. One mistake. I repeated, a bitter edge slicing into the words. One mistake is a drunken kiss or a one-night stand. You two carried on an affair for 4 months under my nose. You planned a future behind my back. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A series of choices. Neither had a response to that. Patrick hung his head. Taylor wiped at fresh tears silently. I felt an uncanny calm descend over me then, born from pure devastation. I was shattered, but I refused to show it. Not here, not in front of them. They didn't get to see me break. This is done, I said quietly. The wedding, our relationship. My voice faltered only a second. Everything. It's over. Iona, please, Patrick whispered. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Get out, I said. The calm in my voice threatened to crack into fury, but I held it together. Both of you. Get out of my house. Taylor looked up in alarm. Where am I supposed to go? She cried. This is my home too. I've been here for 2 years. Her words scraped at my last nerve. I nearly lunged at her then. I wanted them gone so badly it burned. But I held myself rigid. I don't care where you go, I said, ice in every syllable. Go to a hotel. Go to your parents. Hell, go shack up together for all I care. But you cannot stay here. Not after this. Patrick's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and pain. You're seriously kicking us out? We should talk about this when we've all calmed down. I almost laughed in his face. Calm? He thought this was something a night's sleep and a rational discussion would fix? My whole life had just imploded. I couldn't even comprehend facing the next hour, let alone negotiating our future. If I see either of you in this house after tonight, I said evenly, I will tear this place apart. So unless you want to find out what that's like, I suggest you both leave. Now. They exchanged a frightened, uncertain glance. Patrick opened his mouth to say something else, but thought better of it. Instead, he nodded stiffly, tears still glistening in his eyes, and moved toward the hallway. Taylor hesitated, as if she might try one more appeal, but the look on my face must have killed that idea. She silently gathered her coat from the back of the couch. My hands balled into fists as I watched them shuffle toward the front door. Patrick paused in the entryway, turning back to me one last time. I'm so sorry, Iona, he said, voice breaking. I said nothing. I stood rooted to the spot, arms wrapped tightly around myself now. The silence that followed was answer enough. A moment later, the door closed behind them with a heavy thud. I waited, counting breaths, until I heard Taylor's truck start and the 2 vehicles pull away into the night. Only then did I sink to the floor, pressing my back to the wall and burying my face in my hands. In the empty hush of my home, I finally let the first tears fall. I don't remember how long I sat there on the floor, crying until my throat hurt and my eyes ran dry. At some point, I must have pulled out my phone, because the next thing I knew I was on a call with my best friend, Diego. He picked up on the second ring. Iona? Hey, what's up? The moment I heard his familiar, easygoing voice, I broke down again. I managed to choke out, It's Patrick, Something in my voice must have said it all. Diego swore under his breath. Where are you? Home. Yes, I whispered. Don't move. I'm coming, he said firmly. True to his word, 15 minutes later Diego was at my doorstep. I let him in and immediately collapsed into his arms. He didn't ask anything at first, just held me tight in the dim entryway while I trembled. Diego was a plumber by trade, a big guy who carried the scent of pipe sealant and aftershave, and right then he was the only thing keeping me from crumbling completely. After I calmed a little, he guided me to the bedroom and helped toss some of my clothes into a duffel bag. The whole time I was numb, moving on autopilot, barely registering the reality that I was packing to leave my own house. Through the fog, I heard Diego muttering under his breath about no good cheating idiots and asking me gently if I had all the essentials I'd need for a few days away. As we were about to walk out, I caught a glimpse of the framed photo on the hallway table, me and Patrick smiling on a beach in Mexico last summer, sun-drunk and in love. My stomach lurched. I flipped the frame face down without a word and kept walking. We drove through the snowy night back to Diego's place. He got me settled on his couch, wrapped in his warmest blanket, while his old bulldog, Muffin, plodded over to rest her graying muzzle on my knee. I scratched her ears and let the simple comfort of a dog's unconditional affection steady me. Diego returned from his kitchen with 2 beers. He opened one, pressed the cold bottle into my hand, and sat down next to me. I'm here when you're ready, he said. It took a while before I could speak. And when I did, it all spilled out in a jumbled torrent. Coming home early, the confession, the pregnancy, the utter insanity of what Patrick and Taylor had asked of me afterward. Diego listened in stunned silence, his beer untouched on the coffee table. By the time I finished, a fresh tremor of betrayal and anger had crept into my voice. I don't know what to do, I whispered, staring at the floor. They've wrecked everything. My relationship, my home, Even my business is tied up with Taylor. I feel like my entire life just went up in flames tonight. Diego was quiet for a long moment. Then he let out a low whistle. That is one hell of a dumpster fire, Iona. A strangled laugh escaped me, dry and humorless. You're telling me. I wiped the heel of my hand under my eyes, which were throbbing from all the tears. He shook his head, still processing. That snake. I never liked Taylor, you know. She was always too slick for her own good. And Patrick, damn, I knew he had expensive taste, but I thought he actually loved you. Diego's voice hardened. Now I'm thinking he loved your bank account more. I looked at him startled. Diego's expression was dark. Hear me out, he said. You're pulling in serious money with your company now. Some people smell that success and get greedy. You said Taylor talked about expanding big time, right? And Patrick always wanted the high life. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if conspiring. Wouldn't surprise me if those two thought they'd end up running off with your business and your money. Maybe they figured if you stepped back for a break, Taylor could step in and Patrick would play the dutiful father while they took over everything you built. The idea was so cynical, so calculated. I wanted to reject it outright. It painted Patrick and Taylor not just as cheaters, but as scheming villains. But a tiny part of me wondered. I recalled how eager Taylor was to keep the business partnership intact, how Patrick insisted he wanted to eventually be with me. That plan would keep him with access to my home, my income, while also having a child with Taylor. My skin crawled. I don't know, Diego, I murmured, shaking my head. That sounds extreme. Maybe. He took a swig of his beer at last, then grimaced. Or maybe I've just watched too many soap operas with my ex. He attempted a wry smile, trying to lift the mood. I managed a weak chuckle. Either way, what the hell am I supposed to do now? Diego set his bottle down with a firm clink. First things first, protect yourself. Legally. Don't go cowboy on them, no matter how much you want to. He gave me a knowing look. I had to admit, images of driving a bulldozer through my own living room with those two inside had crossed my mind. You need to call a lawyer. A good one. Especially with Taylor entangled in your business. I nodded, realizing he was right. As satisfying as it might be to let my rage run wild, I had too much to lose. I needed a clear head and a solid plan. Diego continued, ticking points off on his fingers. Get your financial documents together. Contracts, bank statements, whatever. There might be something in all that fine print that can help you cut ties with Taylor cleanly, and maybe even without losing everything. Also, probably a good idea to formally call off the wedding plans. See what deposits you can salvage. At the mention of the wedding, my throat tightened. $35,000 in deposits, likely gone down the drain. The beautiful venue in the mountains we'd booked, the caterer, the custom dress I hadn't even gotten to wear, all of it flashed through my mind and nearly brought me to tears again. I closed my eyes and nodded. I'll handle it, I said quietly. Diego bumped my shoulder gently. Hey, you will handle it. You're the toughest person I know. You built an entire company from nothing. You'll get through this, I promise. His faith in me stirred a small ember of resolve inside. Thank you, I whispered. He stood up and stretched. Now, I've got to pull out sofa with your name on it. You stay as long as you need. Mi casa ya su casa. A faint smile touched my lips. What would I do without you? Probably commit a felony, he joked, guiding me to the small guest room. And then I'd have to charge you my bail fee. Plumber rates aren't cheap, you know. I huffed a tiny laugh. It felt good to have even a glimmer of humor break through the darkness. That night, I barely slept. My mind wouldn't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Patrick's stricken face, heard Taylor's voice saying, I'm pregnant, and it all crashed down on me anew. By dawn, I gave up on sleep entirely. I slipped out to the living room, careful not to wake Diego, and sat at his dining table with my laptop and a cup of tea. Muffins snored softly on the rug nearby. I opened my email and started the painful task of canceling wedding arrangements. Venue, photographer, florist. I composed a dozen apologetic messages, vaguely citing unforeseen circumstances and requesting whatever partial refunds might be possible. With each one I sent off, the reality sank in deeper. 8 months of wedding planning evaporated in a keystroke. When that was done, I steeled myself and began combing through my business records. I accessed the company's online banking and scoured transactions. It was tedious work, but it kept my thoughts from drifting to places that hurt. And as the sun rose higher, painting the kitchen in pale winter light, I started finding things that made my numb heart flicker with anger. There were charges I didn't recognize. Expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never set foot in, luxury hotel stays, golf resort fees. I pulled up receipts and found Taylor's signature on them, marked as client development expenses. One charge was a $4,000 weekend trip to Las Vegas that was supposedly a networking event. I doubted any real networking had happened between the spa massage and bottle service I saw listed. My hands trembled on the keyboard as I realized Taylor had been using company funds as her personal piggy bank. Maybe it was technically for clients sometimes, but $23,000 worth of schmoozing in a year? It reeked of abuse. My blood boiled at the thought. She'd been whining and dining on the company dime, on my dime, while I was out in the field actually doing the work. I forced myself to breathe slowly. This was good. This was something I could use. Around 8 o'clock, Diego shuffled out of his room in plaid pajama pants, looking groggy. He saw me amidst a sea of paperwork and my open laptop. Have you been up all night? Pretty much, I said. My voice was raw, but steadier now. I actually had a grim little smile on my face. And I think I just found a way to fire Taylor's ass. He perked up at that and came over to peer at my screen. I showed him the highlighted list I'd compiled of questionable expenses. Diego let out a low, impressed whistle. Well, looks like someone's been a bad girl with a company credit card. That's not even the worst of it, I said. I pulled up an email thread from a month ago with a prospective client. The client had been unsure about our capacity to handle a large project, and Taylor's reply made my jaw drop. She'd written, I'm the principal owner and founder, and I assure you we have the resources. My partner, Iona, just handles the operations side. Principal owner and founder? I was fuming. She'd not only misrepresented her role, she outright lied to make me sound like I worked for her. And she had given this client her personal number, effectively cutting me out of that relationship. Unbelievable, I muttered. She's been telling people she's the boss and I couldn't even finish. It made me sick. Diego looked at me seriously. You need a lawyer. Like, yesterday. Already on it. I had texted my friend Marisol, who is an attorney, early that morning asking for a referral to someone specializing in business law. As expected, Marisol replied immediately with a recommendation and even put in a call to that attorney on my behalf. By 10 a.m., I had an appointment to meet a lawyer named Kevin Liu that afternoon. Before I left for that meeting, another text buzzed my phone, this one from Patrick. In fact, there was a long string of texts from him and a few from Taylor that I hadn't checked since last night. My chest tightened just seeing his name, but I steeled myself and opened the message. We need to talk. Please, let's be adults about this. I know you're hurt, but we can find a way to get through it. I love you. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, Iona. I scrolled. Earlier in the night, shortly after I'd left the house, he had sent, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please answer me. Then one from around 3 a.m. It's almost morning. I'm worried about you. Please say something. I didn't have the emotional capacity to respond. I backed out of his message thread and clicked on one from Taylor. Hers were more direct and somewhat colder. We have to sort out the living arrangements. I need a safe place for my pregnancy and all this stress isn't good for the baby. We should talk soon. Another later. This is as hard on Patrick as it is on you. Don't make it worse by shutting us out. We're still your family one way or another. I felt a fresh surge of anger reading that. The entitlement was astounding. I shoved the phone into my coat pocket without replying to either of them. They could stew in uncertainty for now. My priority was protecting my business and myself. My meeting with Kevin that afternoon was a whirlwind. He was a sharp, fast-talking attorney who had clearly dealt with messy partnership breakups before. I laid out everything. The affair, the pregnancy, the evidence of Taylor's spending, her misrepresentations, the existing contracts on our plate, even the situation with my house and Patrick. Kevin's eyes gleamed when I showed him the bank statements and that client email. She's breached her fiduciary duty to the company, no doubt about it, he said, tapping the papers. And misrepresentation like this is serious. We can likely oust her for cause. The partnership agreement has a clause about conduct that damages the company reputation or finances. He pulled out a copy of the partnership contract, I'd emailed it to him in advance, and pointed to a section. Here. Cause for termination of partnership interest. Misuse of funds, fraudulent representation. Yeah, we've got her. We can dissolve the partnership and buy out her shares at the book value prior to these current contracts. My mind raced. Book value prior? You mean before we sign the big deals? He nodded. Her 35% stake is worth a lot right now, given your pending contracts. But if we boot her for cause, we might only owe her the value before those deals. He did some quick math. Possibly only a few $1,000s. Maybe $5,000. I blinked, hardly daring to believe it. She would lose out on everything. Part of me hesitated. It felt almost too Machiavellian to cut her off with basically nothing after all she'd done. But then I remembered her and Patrick asking me to compromise my entire life for their benefit. I thought of the stolen money, the lies. Any sympathy I had evaporated. Do it, I said. Kevin gave a wolfish grin. Gladly. I'll start drafting the notice of dissolution. We'll serve it to her by the end of the week. And your fiancé, he continued, looking at his notes. Patrick, is it? We should address the living situation. He's not on the deed or any lease, correct? Right. I own the house outright. He's lived there with me for 2 years, though. Okay. In Colorado, as you might know, if someone's been residing in a place, even without a lease, they're essentially a tenant. You'll have to formally evict him. I can help with that, too. We'll give him 30 days notice to vacate. I sighed. The thought of Patrick continuing to live in my home for another month, possibly with Taylor there as well, made my skin crawl. I changed the locks last night after I left, I admitted. I had swung by a 24-hour hardware store on the way to Diego's and bought a new lock set, then returned to the house at 2 a.m. to swap them out. I wanted to be sure neither of those two would be there when I wasn't. Kevin looked a little surprised, then he chuckled. Well, you're entitled to secure your property, though legally he could challenge being locked out. So let's get that notice served ASAP, before he tries anything. That evening, with Kevin's help, I drafted a formal eviction notice for Patrick and had it scheduled for delivery by certified mail and a process server. I also sent a brief email to Patrick and Taylor informing them that effective immediately, Taylor was suspended from her role pending an investigation of financial irregularities. It was couched in careful legal language that Kevin approved. Almost immediately, my phone rang. It was Patrick. I showed the screen to Diego, who was stirring a pot of soup in the kitchen. He raised an eyebrow. I shook my head and set the phone down without answering. A minute later, it buzzed with a text. Are you serious? You're kicking us out and firing Taylor? Can we please talk like adults? I still didn't respond. For the next few days, I moved around in a state somewhere between anger and sorrow. During the day, sheer momentum kept me going. I worked on active projects with my crew, handled client meetings alongside my foreman Mike, whom I quietly told to start transitioning into more responsibility, and met with Kevin to fine-tune the legal action. At night, though, when I tried to rest on Diego's pull-out sofa, the weight of the betrayal would settle on me. I'd stare at the ceiling, feeling the emptiness of losing the man I thought I'd marry and the friend I thought I trusted, all at once. There was no escaping the pain, so I just let it wash through me in those dark hours, silent tears soaking my pillow while Muffin snored gently at my feet. On the third night after everything came out, I was jolted awake around midnight by Muffin barking. I heard muffled voices at the front door. My heart leapt into my throat. I crept toward the window and peeked out. Patrick was standing on the porch, hands shoved in his coat pockets against the cold, talking through the closed door. Diego was on the other side of the door, not opening it. It's the middle of the night, bro. This better be good, I heard him say, sounding more amused than angry. I need to see her, Patrick said. His voice was desperate and clouded in the frigid air. Please. Is she here? Diego responded in a tone of exaggerated politeness. I'm sorry, Ms. Iona is not receiving guests at this time. If you'd like to leave a message, I'd be happy to take it as her secretary. I couldn't see Patrick's face, but I could imagine his annoyance. Diego, come on. This is serious. What's serious is that you're trespassing at my house at midnight, Diego shot back. So unless you've got a pizza delivery for us, I suggest you get off my porch. There was a brief silence. I held my breath. Patrick sounded on the verge of tears. Tell her I'm sorry. Please. Noted, Diego said dryly. Good night, Patrick. I ducked away as I saw Patrick turn and slink back to his car. Diego locked the door and walked back toward the living room, mumbling to Muffin. Secretary, did you get that message? No. Worst secretary ever. I nearly bumped into him in the hallway. He looked at me sheepishly, as if caught. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Oddly, I was. Hearing Patrick's voice had certainly hurt, but seeing how pathetic he looked out there in the cold night gave me a grim sense of resolution. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to hear his excuses or apologies. I wanted him gone. From my house, from my business, from my life. He won't be back, I said quietly. Diego watched me for a moment, then simply nodded. Without another word, we both returned to bed. The next week was hellish, to be honest. Taylor and Patrick apparently decided that if I wouldn't play things their way, they'd burn everything to the ground on their way out. It started with a phone call from one of my smaller clients, a retired couple for whom we were remodeling a kitchen. The wife sounded hesitant on the phone, but finally admitted, we got a strange call from a woman named Taylor. She said you were dealing with some personal issues, and that our project might be delayed or unsafe. I'm sorry, Iona, but we got worried. I closed my eyes, gripping the bridge of my nose. I apologized sincerely to the client and promised that her project was on track and that I'd personally ensure it finished perfectly. After hanging up, I checked my company email. There, sitting unread, was a message from another client backing out of a signed contract. The reason given was vague, just a polite, we've decided to postpone for now. It didn't take much digging to find out they too had been contacted by Taylor with some tale about me being mentally unstable. Over the next few days, 2 contracts, worth about $45,000, were terminated by clients who had been spooked by something Patrick or Taylor told them. Worse, my biggest client, the $1.2 million commercial renovation, put their project on hold and requested a meeting. When I walked into that meeting, I found myself facing a boardroom of executives who looked both sympathetic and concerned. One of them cut right to the chase. We've heard some disturbing things, Ms. Reed. It stung, hearing them use my last name so formally, as if already distancing themselves. Your partner, Ms. Taylor, informed us that you might not be in a position to complete the project. There was mention of erratic behavior on job sites, and even talk of potential legal troubles. My fists tightened under the table. I took a deep breath and, keeping my voice level, explained that Taylor was being removed from the company due to her own ethical violations. I briefly, professionally, outlined that there had been personal betrayals that led her to lash out, but assured them that my company had the full capacity and intention to deliver on our contract. I then offered, if you're uncomfortable continuing, I understand, but I truly hope you'll give me the chance to personally see this project through. I value our relationship and the trust you placed in me when you signed on. The executives exchanged glances. One of them, the senior VP, cleared his throat. To be honest, we're relieved. We weren't sure what to make of those calls. And frankly, Ms. Reed, we much preferred dealing with you directly. We found Ms. Taylor's manner unprofessional at times. Another executive nodded. We went along with her approach because we assumed you endorsed it. If she's gone, that's actually a positive for us. I had to work to keep the smile from my face. I promised them that going forward, all communication would be with me or my newly promoted project manager, Mike. The meeting ended amicably, even warmly. They decided not only to continue the project, but they even mentioned a potential future job once this one was done. As I left that meeting, stepping out into the crisp February air, I felt a surge of triumph. Patrick and Taylor had tried to tear me down, but they'd underestimated one thing. I wasn't alone. My reputation, the one I had earned through years of hard work, spoke louder than their lies. Not that their war was over yet. When Taylor discovered that the big client and several others were sticking with me, she went nuclear. My phone blew up with notifications. I saw a flurry of social media posts on my company's page, on community boards, even on my personal Facebook wall, where Taylor, and likely Patrick under some alias, accused me of everything from abandoning a pregnant woman to embezzling company funds. The wildest post came from Patrick's own account though, a long rant about how I'd thrown away my family and left the mother of his child destitute over a simple mistake. He painted me as this vindictive, heartless ice queen who cared more about money than about the people who loved me. The audacity made me almost laugh. It was so rich coming from him that it undermined itself. Anyone who knew me at all would find it out of character. But plenty of people didn't know me, and the posts gained some traction. Suddenly I was getting a tearful voicemail from Patrick's mother, saying I needed to reconsider and forgive, because a baby was on the way and that baby deserved a loving family. She scolded me for throwing a pregnant woman onto the street. I didn't call her back. Instead, I forwarded the message to Kevin. He advised me not to engage publicly, but to keep documenting everything. And document we did. I printed out every post, saved every voicemail and email. It was all evidence of defamation and harassment. Meanwhile, Patrick and Taylor still hadn't actually vacated my house. The eviction process was in motion, but there were 2 weeks left on the notice. I wasn't staying there, of course. I was effectively homeless while those two squatted in my home. The injustice of that made my blood boil daily. On day 15 of the eviction period, I decided enough was enough. With Diego riding shotgun for support, I drove to my house to check on it and to personally remind Patrick of the timeline. However, when I got there, I found the place unexpectedly quiet. I cautiously unlocked the door, my new key still worked, thank God they hadn't broken the locks, and stepped inside. The living room was eerily empty. I mean literally empty. My couch was gone. So was the TV, the sound system, the art from the walls. I walked through the house in a daze, finding more missing. The tools from my garage, the jewelry box from my dresser, even my late grandmother's silverware set that I kept for special occasions. It was a gut punch on top of everything else. I sank onto the bare floor in the living room, head in my hands, until Diego gently pulled me up and said we had to call the police. The officers arrived, took a report, but ultimately told me what I already feared, that since Patrick had lived there, it might be considered a civil matter. They suggested I compile proof of ownership for the items and take it to court. One of the officers, clearly feeling sympathetic, did say they'd call Patrick and warn him against selling anything until the property dispute was settled. Small comfort. That night I got another call from Patrick's mother again. This time I answered, if only to tell her exactly what her son had done. The moment I said hello, she lit into me, calling me cruel for persecuting her son and Taylor when they were just trying to make things right. Make things right? Do you know they robbed me, Mrs. Holloway? I snapped. Because I just got back from my house, or what's left of it after your son and his mistress cleaned it out. I assume he told you I somehow deserved that too. Her sputtering silence on the line was answer enough. I continued, voice shaking with anger now that I had her attention. Your son lied, cheated, stole from me, and now he's trying to ruin my business. So I'm sorry if you think I'm heartless, but I have zero sympathy left for him or Taylor. Ask them about the $5,000 in belongings that just went missing from my house. Ask them about the false rumors they're spreading. She mumbled something like, I wasn't aware, and I hung up. I had bigger problems to deal with than a mother who'd been fed lies. I wish I could say that was the worst of it. But Taylor and Patrick weren't done. A few days later, I woke up to an email from a client, one that Taylor had signed shortly before all this, that read, in part, given these concerning reports about your company's stability, we regretfully cannot move forward with the project at this time. It was another big contract gone. My company's reputation was taking a hit from their smear campaign, and I felt fury building in me like a storm. It was so blatantly vindictive and, frankly, stupid of them. Didn't they realize this was leaving a trail of evidence? Kevin certainly realized. He was practically giddy at the strong defamation case we were building. They're handing this to you on a silver platter, he said during one of our many phone calls. Just keep saving everything. We'll hit back once they're out of the house and out of the company. Timing is everything. Finally, mercifully, the court date for the eviction arrived. I sat in a tiny courtroom with Kevin while Patrick and Taylor appeared with a legal aid attorney. Taylor was visibly pregnant now, her belly starting to show under a loose dress. It twisted something in me to see it, not out of sympathy, but out of sheer disbelief that this had become my life, entangled with theirs in such a sordid way. Their lawyer grasped at straws, claiming we were common law married, portraying them as victims of a trauma. The judge saw through it, especially once Kevin explained how they had concocted the assault story and even been arrested and charged for it. In short order, the judge ordered their eviction effective immediately. They had 48 hours to leave, after which anything left behind would be considered abandoned and I could dispose of it. I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in weeks. One huge weight was finally about to lift. I would get my home back. True to the order, Patrick's parents helped him and Taylor move out 2 days later. I didn't go to the house alone. I brought along a police officer for a civil standby to ensure nothing else went awry. It was a quiet, tense affair. Patrick avoided looking at me as he carried out suitcases to his dad's truck. Taylor waddled slowly, head down, packing a few boxes with things I recognized as hers. Framed photos, clothes, the gaudy crystal vase Patrick's mom had gifted us last Christmas. At one point, Taylor's father approached me. He was an older man with tired eyes. "I'm sorry for all of this," he said in a low voice. "We didn't raise her to be like this. I don't know what got into her." His face crumpled with embarrassment and pity. I found myself feeling the slightest twinge of compassion for him. None for Taylor, but for her parents, who clearly were blindsided and ashamed. "I appreciate you saying that," I told him. I hope she sorts herself out for the baby's sake." He nodded, looking like he wanted to say more, but then he retreated to help his daughter, who was struggling to lift a box. I noticed as they loaded Taylor's things into her parents' car that my flat-screen TV was among them, and it was cracked down the middle. I opened my mouth to protest, then just shook my head. Added to the list of losses. The TV can be replaced. My peace of mind, not so easily, but this was a start. By that evening, they were gone. I changed the locks a second time and stood alone in the middle of my half-empty living room. There were still gouges on the hardwood where furniture had been dragged out, empty hooks where artwork used to hang. But it was my space again. I sank onto the floor, where just a couple weeks ago I'd collapsed in tears, and let out a long, shuddering breath. It was over, at least that chapter. The next morning, an email arrived from Taylor's lawyer. In flowery language, it conveyed a proposition. Taylor would surrender her 35% stake in the company if I agreed not to pursue criminal charges for the financial misconduct we'd uncovered. Essentially, she'd give up everything for the price of not facing potentially years in court or even jail for fraud. The offer was to sell me her shares for $1. I was actually with Kevin in his office when I read it, and I remember a slow smile spreading over my face. It was exactly what we'd hoped for. A clean break. She was out. "Take it," said Kevin. "I will," I replied. Later that day, I met Taylor and her attorney in a conference room to sign the papers. Patrick was notably absent. This meeting was strictly about the business. Taylor looked pale and exhausted. A shell of the confident, chirpy woman who used to stride into client meetings in designer heels. Her hands shook slightly as she signed the documents, transferring her interest to me. In that moment, watching her, I felt no triumph, just a hollow sense of relief. She'd made her choices, and this was the consequence. Afterwards, as I walked into the lobby where Diego was waiting for moral support, we saw Taylor heading out the opposite doors. Diego couldn't resist. He called out, loud enough for her to hear across the echoing marble floors. "Hey, Taylor. Congratulations. You just set the record for the most expensive affair in Colorado history. That fling cost you about $200,000 and a career. I hope it was worth it." I swatted his arm, giving him a reproachful look, but I couldn't help the short laugh that escaped me. It was cruel, perhaps, but damned if it wasn't true. Taylor didn't turn back or respond. She disappeared into the parking lot, head down. Diego drove me back to the office afterward, insisting on a celebratory stop at a craft store on the way. I was perplexed until he emerged with a small black picture frame. At my questioning look, he grinned. "For the dollar she paid you, of course. You gotta hang that trophy up." I actually laughed, a genuine warm laugh, for the first time since this nightmare began. And that's how, by the following week, a single dollar bill, signed by Taylor as part of the official transaction, ended up framed on the wall of my office. An inexpensive memento of an immensely costly lesson. With Taylor gone and Patrick finally out of my house, life didn't immediately snap back to normal, but there was a sense of forward momentum again. My team had been briefed that Taylor was no longer with the company. Their reactions ranged from shock to, frankly, celebration. Mike took to his new role as project manager with a zeal I hadn't seen before. "We've got your back, boss," he told me after a team meeting. Taylor was a snake. We just didn't think she'd be stupid enough to bite the hand that fed her. I had to blink away a sudden sting of emotion at that. I'd been so busy holding myself together and fighting battles on every front that I hadn't fully grasped how much support I actually had. My employees, my clients, my friends, they all rallied around me in subtle and not so subtle ways. The business, despite the initial hit, not only stabilized but began to thrive like never before. Without Taylor's interference or Patrick's distractions, I poured myself into work. It wasn't just escapism, it was rebuilding. I met with old clients to assure them of our new structure and focus. I hired a seasoned accountant to prevent any future shenanigans like the kind Taylor had pulled. I secured 2 new commercial contracts, one of them even larger than the big job we landed before, bringing in over $3 million in revenue. Each evening, I returned to my own home. It took time to restore it, to replace what was missing, to scrub away the phantom traces of those two. I had the locks changed yet again, repainted a couple of rooms just for a fresh start, and bought myself a new living room set that I chose, with no memories attached. I even transformed the second bedroom, what would have been a nursery had things gone differently, into a home office, a space just for me. In the spring, exactly 1 year after the day I would have been married, I quietly celebrated having survived one of the worst storms of my life. Diego and a few close friends took me out to a bar, where we raised glasses to new beginnings, and as Diego joked with a dramatic bow, Queen Iona, ruler of the renovation empire. I rolled my eyes at that, but I couldn't deny there was a kernel of truth. I felt more in command of my life and my business than ever. Patrick and Taylor, on the other hand, continued to spiral. Gossip in our town moves fast, and I heard bits and pieces. Patrick ended up moving in with his grandmother in Nebraska because, rumor had it, even his own parents had grown tired of his excuses. He tried to get a job at a couple of construction firms and a real estate office, but as soon as they called me for a reference, well, I told the truth. I forwarded those HR managers a copy of the police report from his false assault allegation and noted that he was still facing charges for it. I'm not sure what he expected, that I'd lie for him after what he did. Needless to say, he remained radioactive in the industry. As for Taylor, she gave birth to a baby girl in late summer. I only knew because a mutual acquaintance mentioned seeing a post online, but motherhood didn't seem to tame Taylor's spite. Not long after, I heard she had tried to file for financial assistance, claiming she was a single, unemployed mother with no assets. That would have been true, except an investigator found out she had stashed away some cash, likely the remainder of what she'd siphoned from our business that I hadn't caught, and a collection of valuables, some of which were mine. It amounted to fraud, and she was charged. On top of that, word was she wasn't adjusting well to motherhood. Neighbors reported she'd leave the baby alone while she went out. Eventually, I learned Taylor's parents intervened and took custody of the child for the baby's safety. It was a tragic epilogue to her part of the story, but again, I struggled to summon much sympathy. Every step of the way, she had chosen the low road, and it led exactly where one would expect. I thought I'd seen the last of both of them. I hoped I had. But life has a funny way of bringing things full circle. About a year and a half after the initial blow-up, by which time I was 31 and truly thriving, I got a call from Kevin. His tone was laced with irony as he said, "You won't believe who contacted me." It was Patrick. Through a new attorney, actually. The message was that Patrick and Taylor wanted to meet with me to propose an idea. I nearly told Kevin to send them straight to hell. But curiosity, and perhaps a bit of a vindictive streak, got the better of me. I agreed to a meeting, on my terms, at my office on a Friday afternoon. When the day came, I sat in the conference room with Kevin and, naturally, Diego, who wouldn't miss this show for the world. We didn't have to wait long. Patrick and Taylor arrived together, and I had to school my features into neutrality when I saw them. They looked rough. There's no other word. Patrick's once impeccably styled hair was overgrown and dull. He'd lost a significant amount of weight, his cheekbones stark against sallow skin, and he wore an ill-fitting suit that looked bought secondhand. Taylor had fared no better. Her face was drawn, with dark circles under her eyes, and she wore simple, worn-out clothes that hung loosely on her. She clutched a notebook and a stack of papers with white-knuckled hands. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Patrick said. His voice was subdued, missing the confident lilt it once had. I gave a curt nod and gestured for them to sit. Diego sat at my right, doing a valiant job of keeping a straight face as he glanced between our two guests. Kevin, ever the professional, simply clicked his pen and said, "So, what is this proposal you have?" Patrick cleared his throat and began. He spoke about how he'd reflected on everything, how hitting rock bottom had changed him. Taylor chimed in at points, saying how being a single mother, I had to hide my scoff at that, given she wasn't even raising her child, had matured her, made her responsible. It was a lot of preamble that Kevin patiently steered back on track. The proposal? They wanted back in. Not into my personal life, no, that ship had sailed and even they knew it, but into the business world. Specifically my business world. Patrick, with a weak echo of his old salesman charm, laid it out. They knew I was doing well, expanding even. They had connections, or so they claimed, in neighboring states. Patrick had an uncle in Nebraska who knew some developers. Taylor had contacts in Wyoming from college. If I were willing to back a new expansion, set up a branch that they would run, they could make us all a lot of money. In return, they wanted me to essentially bankroll them, cover Taylor's outstanding legal debts, give Patrick a company truck and a salary to tide him over, and split the profits 50-50 on any new ventures they landed. As I listened, it was like I was outside my body, hearing a comedy routine play out. I fought to keep my face impassive, but I could feel Diego practically vibrating with barely contained laughter beside me. He coughed into his hand to disguise a chuckle when Taylor earnestly declared, "We've really grown as people. We understand the value of loyalty and hard work now." I let them talk for a good 15 minutes, just to see how deep a hole they'd dig. It was astonishing, really, that they thought I might say yes, that they believed they had any leverage or goodwill left with me at all. When Patrick finally wound down, finishing with, "This could be a win-win for all of us, a fresh start," I leaned back in my chair and looked at them. So I said slowly, "Let me get this straight. You two are offering to expand my company into new territories. You want me to put up the money, and in return you'll, what? Use your stellar reputations and vast expertise to bring in business." My words dripped with sarcasm. Patrick flushed and started to protest, but I held up my hand. "No, I want to make sure I understand. You want me to pay off Taylor's debts, give Patrick a job and a truck, and then split my profits with you. Two people who lied to me, stole from me, and tried to destroy me. Does that sum it up?" They looked at each other. Taylor had tears in her eyes. Patrick's jaw clenched. Neither spoke. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. My voice was quiet, steady. "You know what? I am going to help you both." Their faces lit up, eyes widening in cautious hope. "I'm going to help you," I continued, "by giving you the most important lesson of your lives. Actions have consequences. You burned every bridge, destroyed every relationship, and lost every opportunity you had because of your own choices. The only thing you're entitled to now is the fallout. Patrick blinked, as if he didn't quite grasp what I was saying. Iona, what does that mean exactly? It means get the hell out of my office and never contact me again. I stood up, my chair scraping on the floor. There is no deal. There is no fresh start. Not with me. You made your choices. Now live with them. A tear slid down Taylor's cheek. Patrick opened his mouth, a final plea on his tongue. And maybe Diego added, unable to resist as he gave them a mock contemplative shrug. Next time, don't shit where you eat. Patrick's shoulders sagged. Taylor covered her face, choking back a sob. Without another word, they turned and walked out of the conference room. I followed to make sure they actually left the building. My receptionist's eyes went wide seeing Patrick Holloway, once a rising young professional in town, shuffle past looking broken and 10 years older, with Taylor sniffling at his side. Neither of them even glanced back at me. When the front door closed behind them, I felt a weight lift off me that I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I watched through the window as they crossed the parking lot toward a beat-up old sedan, two hollow figures fading into the dusk. For a brief moment, I did feel a pang of pity, but it passed quickly. They had done this to themselves. I turned away from the glass and walked back to join Diego and Kevin. My lawyer gave me a nod that said I'd handled it perfectly. Diego just let out a low, "Damn girl," and bumped my arm. "It's really over," I murmured. It was. They left town soon after that meeting. I don't know where they went, and I truly don't care. Word trickled back eventually that Patrick's grandmother passed away and left her house to someone else in the family. Apparently, even she had been disgusted enough to write him out of her will. And Taylor? Last I heard, she was facing yet another fraud investigation for trying to claim benefits she wasn't entitled to. They thought they could have it all. My company, my money, my life. And in the end, they had nothing. As for me, I kept moving forward. In fact, not long after, I landed a dream contract to renovate a luxury resort in Nevada for $4.2 million. I expanded my business to a second office and hired 12 more people. I even started dating again. A kind, steady man who knows this whole story and treats me with a gentle love that feels nothing like the roller coaster I had with Patrick. Life, as strange as it is, has turned out better than I ever imagined. Sometimes I glance at that framed dollar on my office wall, the trophy of my hard-won victory, and I think about how close I came to a very different fate. The worst thing that ever happened to me led to some of the best things in my life. I wouldn't thank Patrick or Taylor for it. No, they don't deserve that much credit. But I'm grateful that I saw their true selves before I made the irreversible mistake of marrying one and giving the other any more control over my business. The past is finally where it belongs, behind me. Patrick and Taylor are nothing more than ghosts now, cautionary tales I occasionally hear about in rumor but no longer fear. I have my home, my company, my peace, and the people who truly care about me. They have whatever scraps are left for them. They made their choices. And I made mine. I turned toward the window of my office, where the late afternoon sun slants in warmly, and I let out a breath I feel like I've been holding for 2 years. There's work to do and a beautiful life to live. And I never looked back.